Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships, where today we're talking and featuring the Tier 10 Russian heavy cruiser, or almost battle cruiser if you really want to say, but heavy cruiser, the Moskva. Last time I featured this ship and did a Friday highlight, a Great Canary build video, was back in 2022 in July, and I felt like, well, we're kind of due. It's been 4 years since I've highlighted and talked about the ship. So how is Moskva doing in 2026? I think Moskva overall is still doing well. She's a very consistent ship in terms of what she has the ability to deliver, and I have 3 clips here I'm going to highlight and talk about different things. But really, it's been, of course, like any other ship class in the game, or ship has experienced since July of 2022. You know, I think submarines were introduced officially in October 2022. And now we have much more ships with HE Airstrikes. So what we're seeing now basically is Moskva is a little bit more challenged in terms of 1, submarine gameplay, 2, Dutch airstrikes, and 3, more overmatch from battleships here in the game. Now, in terms of Moskva and her weaknesses and how she performs, those are still pretty much the same. Like, you're going to see me overplay my hand here. I'm going to end up accelerating too far forward, and we're going to get massively Citadel. Now, the Citadel, like, let's say with Moskva, it's 155 millimeter armor plated, but it's a much higher on the ship, even though the ship kind of sits like lower into the water, than compared to something like the Des Moines or Salem, which has 152 millimeter armor protection for the Citadel, but the Citadel sits lower effectively when you're comparing the two ships. Or we have like a 25 millimeter bow, but a 50 millimeter icebreaker underneath. With these 220s versus like Des Moines Salem's 203s. And what I've been finding myself here in 2026 is I'm leaning more and more towards more of these even heavier cruisers or battle cruiser play in World of Warships. That I find myself that I'm like, I need more hit points to deal with kind of how the game is. And I think this is where I end up drifting too far forward. More hit points to deal with more of the Dutch airstrikes, torpedoes. I need more armor because of Overmatch from battleships in the game. Even though here I still mess up colossally, like you're going to see. Yeah, there's 30,000, and we're still going to lose a little bit more here because there's also an Iowa back there. Yeah, another 8,500. So that's kind of what we're at in terms of how I've been experiencing the game more and more lately here in World of Warships. Not saying Des Moines or Salem are not good anymore, but it's just I'm finding myself increasingly playing more battle cruisers, like even like Princeland, Arena, and just ships that are giving me more hit points. So with that being said, you're going to see several times here we have a Bilal back and behind us as we take out the Ragnar. And how am I dealing with the threats? Most all the games I play, I didn't really have to deal with any HE airstrikes, so not too much to show on that. And the challenge, why I think Moskva, I think overall she's still doing pretty great overall in 2026. The challenge that Moskva has, in my opinion, is that kind of like Des Moines or Salem again, you tend to find yourself, you're sitting on islands. You can see I'm working to control this key objective area on this cap here at Bravo. And when you're kind of sitting in a playstyle like this, it invites those Dutch airstrikes. It invites submarines pinging you and torpedoing you, let alone more the increasingly more powerful aircraft carriers we're getting here in the game as time goes on. That you really just end up getting punished for sitting in a position like this. You know, like I wanted to go wide out to the left, but then I was like, you know, I'm not going to do that because submarines. You know, I was thinking about sitting more bow out facing the one line off this island right here on my left. And I decided like that's just not in my favor because the sub and the DDs usually go wide. But I do want to support if I'm able to, but you can just kind of see how that has gone. So what I have found particularly, let's talk about first with submarines with Moskva in 2026. I'm finding myself being more mindful, like, okay, if I have a submarine spawning on my flank, like my teammate, you know, then I know enemy subs can be on that flank, then I'm going to have to be more mindful about how I position. Either A, I'll reposition, like I'll keep this island between me and the whole left flank, or B, I'm going to sit in a kited position where I can disengage if the submarine pushes, which you've seen how far back the battleships, our teammates back there in I-7 on the mini-map right now have fallen back to. That's kind of the effect submarines end up having, and I'm like, well, I don't really want to give up a lot of territory, so let me just end up sitting here more directly on Bravo Cap and just keep the island between me and that. When it comes to Dutch airstrikes, you know, you were trying to pay attention. Is there a Dutch cruiser on, or destroyer, or a German now, the ZH-1 with the airstrike, or is there a battleship with an HE airstrike on my flank? Because you end up having to, I mean, and you shouldn't as a cruiser player anyhow, you constantly have to play with your throttle. It's not amazing acceleration you have on Moskva. It's like, without taking prop mod, it's like 29.6, I think, acceleration to full speed. So like 30 seconds, basically. You know, we take prop mod because I view that very important for the cruisers, most cruisers in World of Warships. So we're constantly rocking back and forth, just as we avoided those torps from the destroyer that was it GQ Johnny was rushing in behind us. So you have to constantly keep moving, be mindful. The map awareness that, let's say, Moskva in 2026 is at an all-time high. It's never been higher in World of Warships because of having to deal with subs. I mean, you can have an enemy sub be dark for like 6-7 minutes in the game, never be spotted, and all of a sudden he just pops it behind you and torpedoes you. Like, you know, you can have all the map awareness, situational awareness in the world, and that doesn't really fix or solve anything. You know, here's the second clip, and we're going to be working this island here right in front of me, going to get cozied up on it. We don't want to advance too far forward. So you can have all the map situational awareness in the world, and just as I got spotted there, I was like, well, I want to pop my 12-kilometer radar, and it ends up being the sub, right? And we're going to flip over to our, I think it's 8-kilometer depth charge airstrike, which is great that you actually have that versus ship-based ASW on Moskva. So you can, you're gonna see some examples of us utilizing the sub, the depth charges here. I'm just guessing. I'm thinking he's still pushing further into the cap. There's no cap standard battle, and there's a splash damage. Yeah, and a flooding that we've caused on him. So I think he DCP'd when I shot him, so now he's going to be flooding. And it's nice that Wargaming actually gives us the oil slick. I don't remember if that was always a feature with subs when they introduced it back in 2022, because they kind of change things. And so we're basically tracking where is the Bilal going. But situational awareness in cruisers is incredibly important in World of Warships in general in 2026 beyond just Moskva. What I find with Moskva, you know, even in this game, because the enemy team's not playing the flanks, so we're paying attention to how's the enemy team positioning and playing. That I'm not always necessarily playing as aggressive as I might in the past, but because I see opportunity here and how the enemy teams, they're kind of pushing already back into their base, back into their spawn, our team is naturally just going to loop in, and we're going to apply a lot of pressure here overall as we're still dropping depth charges on the sub. Merp. So, when you're dealing with the sub, it's always great to have an island between you and the enemy submarine, all said and done. Let's see, we talk about Dutch airstrikes. I mean, you know, when we talk about the Dutch airstrikes, let's say they're normally between, 10 kilometers to 15 kilometers. Again, you're trying to be mindful of where our enemy ship's positioned. There might be some Dutch ships positioned where you have to avoid. You know, here's a Tromp. We do deal with a Tromp this game. You know, thankfully for us, maybe he tried to drop us, but or he's going for a Kremlin, which he's probably just trying to start firing Kremlin because he doesn't pin the deck of a Kremlin. It would have been smarter for him to have gone for me, but hey, whatever. The things that work really well for Moskva, like compared to the 2022 video I did, you know, now I have the unique upgrade, which gives us more range, and we have tighter dispersion. So we get some very tight dispersion when firing at range, you know, so even as Hayate, we can effectively put fire on him. You know, in the past it was like the main battery mod 3 for the faster reload, but I mean, hey, that's 5 shells landed on the Hayate 12 kilometers away, so we're just kind of predicting how he's going to turn to help us land more accurately. And that's pretty huge, especially with destroyers when you're trying to whittle them down and give your friendly submarine or your friendly destroyer more of a leg up when they do deal with the enemy destroyers. So you can deliver, very effective with that when you go for the full radar build with the 12 kilometer. It's still really potent and strong on Moskva. You still have your 5 kilometer detection of enemy ships, hydroacoustic search with Moskva. And you still get the same great guns, not flatter shell trajectory, so you don't have to lead ships as much. If I'm sitting here and I'm trying to shoot a Moskva, which only if I had a range mod could I shoot the enemy Moskva right now, so he keeps going broadside to us a lot here. So that's something why, again, I think I've been drifting more towards these cruisers that have larger guns, larger hit points, more armor, just because in 2026 it just feels like you need it more and more and more, especially when you're playing at the high tier here, as we're going to begin to push up. Our Hawaii friend here is already being quite aggressive, so to speak, and pushing up as we have this enemy battleship that's kind of sitting behind the island, as we're going to let our teammates deal with that. Yeah, there's our Citadel. So you can, gun's pretty effective overall at long range outside the video. The one time I got featured by Jingles with Moskva, my Moskva guns were not behaving at all. They were all over the place till the very end of the video. That was a funny battle. So Moskva, I've just enjoyed even more so. So Moskva is the 10th most played ship I have in terms of the random battles. I think we have 80 battles with Moskva in randoms with the 57% win rate. And I just like the ship because it's very consistent. Always the big things, like the weaknesses of Moskva, the way I would phrase it would be like, one of the big things, our concealment when we're not shooting our main guns was like 14.1 kilometers. So if you spawn in mid and you want to go to a flank, you usually have to make your move, traverse to the other flank in spawn and then push in, because Moskva is pretty glaring weakness when you're broadside because of how big the Citadel is. It's very easy to lose a lot of hit points, like the 30k Citadel salvo you saw earlier. So early positioning is important, that you're always angling. You're being able to have the situational awareness of what's going around with you when it comes to submarines, Dutch ships, aircraft carriers, right? Because when you're trying to play more of these island-like positions, you just get punished. So usually if I see aircraft carrier, I see 2 Dutch cruisers, then it's like, I don't know if I'm really going to sit on this island. I'm probably going to consider being more in a kite-out position to help me effectively deal with enemy CVs and deal more easier and avoid dodge. The Dutch airstrikes, it's easier to dodge a Dutch airstrike or CV strike when you're kited out versus pushing into it, so to speak, normally, as it were. So the enemy team lineup is something that becomes increasingly more important, especially as a cruiser player in World of Warships in 2026. There was another point I was wanting to make with that. A wise aircraft carrier player, if he sees me in Moskva and I'm like the last map when I'm sitting over Bravo cap, ideally if he wants his destroyer player to take the cap, he needs to punish the radar cruiser that's guarding that cap. That's what a smart aircraft carrier player does. Not that all aircraft carrier players are smart in World of Warships, as I pay attention to the Hawaii that I don't get crossfired from it. So that's kind of, when you deal with a potent CV player, or even just an average CV player that gets and understands those common core concepts, then it can be something you have to be more wary of and pay attention to quite strongly here in World of Warships. As we're going to go ahead and transition to the last clip now. We're pushing in strongly. I'm hugging the island here at Alpha. We have our Napolis kind of pushing into a Holland and an enemy submarine. So don't know how smart that is. But as soon as we get lit here, we see the caps being taken, and we are going to open up on the Holland. We're trying to see if we can get the sub. He's a little outside of our depth charge airstrike, so we'll shoot Holland one more time, and then we'll flip over to where the sub was. I'm going to have to guess here, and just kind of guess he might turn out and try to flee. And there's an enemy Minotaur back here behind the islands. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to sit in Alpha, but I'm going to be facing towards Bravo cap. And you're going to see part of that tanking capability that Moskva does as we get some hits on the enemy sub. So this Napoli is throwing away a lot of his hit points to just push a Holland, which it's not great to push a Holland, nor is it great to push an enemy submarine. So the chances of this Napoli surviving this encounter, in addition to that Minotaur decides to smoke up and shoot Napoli if he goes out a little bit further, is not great for him. And, you know, yeah, he's dead, in addition to the enemy Trump killing our Trump and our Petropavlovsk, who's going to have an insanely good game, and you'll see that when I throw all the battle post-battle result screens up here, kills the enemy Kleber. So having this play style where you are a tanky cruiser, you do tank some attention for your team. You know, naturally you're going to see here we melt to a lot of focus fire. I'm not going to push for the Minotaur, even though I could easily come around the corner and probably deal with him, because one, I don't want to eat Holland torps. I don't want to deal with sub-torps, and I don't want to deal with Minotaur torps. There's too many torpedoes that play. And so rather I'm going to duck in behind the island here, and I'm just going to sit and control the island and try to spot the sub or this destroyer from my Holland if I can as well, with the radar or hydroacoustic search all said and done here. But now we have a pretty strong position here because the enemy Minotaur has just kind of allowed it, and this enemy Minotaur, we're going to psych him out where he thinks I'm just going to go through this gap and he can just simply torp me. And when we effectively shut down the enemy Minotaur for the rest of this entire game, all said and done, which is pretty fun when you kind of have that happen. You go up against an enemy player who's not too competent, so to speak. But it also helps us to support our Holland and our friendly Petropavlovsk that are sitting on Bravo. So I can shoot at Sherman. Now the challenge like I end up having here is if you get a lot of DPM focus fire from enemy cruisers or even battleships kind of try to start farming us out, it's not great, effectively all said and done. Now our Yu Yang, bless his heart, I don't know why he pushed out the way he did, because I think he's also taking damage from the enemy Minotaur and not keeping an island between him and the enemy Minotaur. So he's going to lose a lot of hit points really fast and get torpedoed by the enemy sub. But we are going to be able to take out, I think, did we take out the Holland? No, our Yamato takes out the Holland. Regardless, we would have. And what's frustrating is, I mean, our Yamato ends up moving. He doesn't stay on this flank, which honestly, he probably should leave A with the enemy sub in the background and just reposition up and support Bravo. And we just kind of focus on holding our own. But the big thing when, I talk about weaknesses, it's earlier positioning. You have a really weak broadside. The other thing to be mindful of is how much you are angling in Moskva. If I'm not showing, and I talked about situation awareness and enemy team lineup, but if you're like that game, I lost to 30,000 hit points, so I could have easily avoided 30,000 hit points. I drifted too far forward. So as you see here, I'm constantly moving still, right? Like I'm not just sitting still. You always should do that, but you just have to be mindful of the risk that you don't propel yourself out into an Iowa and an enemy Italian super battleship, just wrecking your hit points here. And this Holland, this Thunder are pushing up here as they're going to pop my radars. I want to know where the sub's at, because I can see enemy team started capturing area A, and I know it's not the Minotaur. I'm trying to take as many hit points off the sub as I can for a later engagement if I need to try to be the one to kill him, and take away the sub's confidence in trying to deal with me, because I know that sub just wants to get more into the back of A and then just torp me as I sit here. So the sub again is my biggest threat at this point in time in this battle. So I have to continue to be aware of him, and this Minotaur is just kind of holding this position to punish me if I decide to push out past the island. And as our team ends up winning C here shortly, that's going to push them down from C and towards myself. So like, for example, between a Moskva and a Salem versus a Moskva, ideally the Salem wins that engagement from just purely by the DPM of his 203s. He reloads faster. We put a lot more fire on us, so now we end up having to deal with a Salem who doesn't really have anyone else to punish him necessarily, unless someone gets shots on him from over the island, from whether it's our team at sea. But we're still focusing on taking out the Sherman here. Even after he goes dark, we already had shells in the air, so we get the kill there. But we take out an important target for our team, and I'm having to be even more mindful of the sub behind as torps come from the sub. So you can see kind of what's happening here is I'm just kind of being overwhelmed, as it were. I've got a sub behind me. I've got a Salem in front of me. I've got a Minotaur off to my left. I've got a Brisbane now pushing in. This Minotaur who's being very self-conscious the whole entire time that I'm there, and is also baiting his torps. So it's kind of this play with Moskva that you get the most out of the ship the more you're aware of what's happening around you. You know, like Brisbane's a light cruiser. I can easily punch through his citadel with my 220 millimeter guns here. So we'll see. Yeah, not there because he got angled out pretty good. And I hope I am actually saying the main caliber right, because I'm like, maybe I'm thinking of like Petro. But the Brisbane has a really long citadel, so it's very easy, even if my shot does fall a bit behind that, you know, most Brisbanes, you know, I can actually citadel him through the rear too. It's a flat bottom on the back, which is why I was still firing AP there, and I think I switched to HE. No, I don't. So we can easily take him out, right? And now the Minotaur's backed off, and now I know it's really important for me that the sub's probably about to get behind me if he's not already. So I'm going to have to push up. Minotaur has fallen off. And having Nikolai Kuznetsov as your legendary commander is insanely valuable for any of your Russian ships that you can mount him on, especially the premiums like Moskva, Stalingrad that I run him both on. To give us that extra bit of life here, that I can drill some more hit points down on the Salem before I die. You know, now the Colbert showed up. So, you know, we are going to go down here. It's just a question of how much more damage am I able to do here. So that's kind of my summary, I guess, of Moskva in 2026 in terms of how well I feel the ship performs. I think she's incredibly consistent. I mean, her strength is her armor, her guns are really reliable, and so many ships here in World of Warships, if you just can have reliable guns, like, it makes for a great combination. But, you know, Moskva in 2026 deals more from the enemy submarines, Dutch ships with the HE Airstrike, and more of the powerful aircraft carriers that are continually getting introduced here into the game. So, but each of these post-battle results, you're going to see us very consistently, even if we don't do a lot of damage, we consistently score high on our team score. You know, this one was a bit more damage, 137,000 compared to the last one, as I was farming free XP. That's why I've been playing Moskva so much. But 2,200 base XP. And then we're going to go to, I think, the first game now. And you can see, I think that one wasn't a lot either, 74,000. But yeah, again, on the team score, we're going to be consistent in terms of landing on top of the team, even though this was a raffle stomp for our team and taking out the enemy team. So I would have loved to have more time to have played that battle, as it were. So tomorrow, do an upgrade commander build video on Moskva. Talk again, highlighting some of the strengths, weaknesses. But the build I'm running on the commander is pretty much the same outside of the unique upgrade. But I just felt like it's kind of due to talk about Moskva here in 2026, since the game has naturally progressed more when we're seeing more of these other classes in the game that punish more of the kind of cruisers that would ideally just want to sit on an objective, on a cap, and guard it and try to help your teammate destroyers flip it. But now, depending on what ships are in enemy team lineup, kind of dictates your behavior in Moskva, whether you sit on the cap or sometimes you end up just being more on a kite out position. But I don't like to kite out. I like to try to fight for the key objective areas, and so far I'm finding that rewarding. But especially when there's aircraft carrier at play that decides to focus you, then it's like, I can't sit here. I have to disengage and just try to shoot down his planes, draw his focus off my teammates, you know, whatever that may be. So if you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you subscribe, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank you to those who support me on the channel. And until next time, take care.